Well, my name is Armand Johnston. Everybody calls me Johnny. I'm a retired Master Chief Aviation Fire Control Technician and also a retired Master Chief Photographer's Mate. And everything I was assigned at rates in the Navy have been disestablished. So now I'm a retired AVCM, which is what they decided to join all the E9s together in. So I joined the Navy back in 1945, at the tail end of World War II. The major reason I joined the Navy was I had an uncle who was a tin can sailor, and he was a four-striper. He was head of a destroyer flotilla, and I used to ride around with him, and he told me things about the Navy. But one of the things that really impressed me was he used to go, this was in San Francisco, I used to go out to Goat Island, and he'd go in the dispensary, and even though he was Secretary-Treasurer of Mackey Radio, not a very light job, he had plenty of money and everything, but he'd go out there and get his toothpaste, his mouthwash, toothbrushes, anything. You know, he didn't buy any medical supplies, and he said, remember, if you stay in the Navy's going to take care of you medically for the rest of your life. And I said, I put that in my book, and I really remembered that. So that was one of the main reasons I joined the Navy. Went through boot camp in San Diego. After that, I was sent to Pensacola, Florida, and went through photo school there, the A school. And then after I graduated, I went to motion picture camera school, where we studied motion picture photography. So that's sort of how I got in photography and what started off in the Navy. One of the interesting things in Pensacola was that we had a whole group of senior photographers who were going through A school, which is the basic school, with us. They'd been out in the Pacific shooting pictures, and now they're going to send them to school just before they retired. Well, I found out later they didn't have enough points to get out of the Navy at that time, so they decided to send them to school. And we learned a lot from them, the real action stuff, what photography in wartime was really all about. At the end of the war, most of the senior photographers got out. And so there were openings as instructors. And I became an instructor in Pensacola, teaching motion picture cameras, which I just learned. And that was really my first career in the Navy. It was motion pictures, training films, documentaries, newsreel things, all that big stuff, carrying around heavy 35mm motion picture cameras. Still have a dent on my shoulder from that old tripod. When I got to be chief, I didn't have to carry the camera around anymore. That was a different story. But anyhow, after photography, the school, I was there for about 3 years, and then I was transferred out to San Diego. And San Diego, I got in a squadron called VF-1 Easy, which was a fighter squadron that had F-6Fs. What they needed a photographer for, we never did figure out. But anyhow, that was where I was assigned. So in San Diego, they sent all the squadron photographers to the Fleet Air Photo Lab. And everybody worked together. It was a joint effort to do any photography that was required at AirPac around the San Diego area. So I learned a lot there from a lot of people. I primarily did motion picture photography. And one of my great friends, a still photographer named Kaz, worked with me during all this time. He took all the still pictures that everybody saw right away. I took the movies that were seen much later, or many times just ended up in the archives, and nobody ever saw them. But that was sort of the story of my life to begin with. Then along came Korea, and 10 Navy photographers, myself included, were joined into a combat photo group. And this was really to cover primarily what the Marines were doing, because the Marines had 60mm camera photographers, but nobody with 35mm cameras, which are what the newsreels needed in those days. So anyhow, a reserve commander, Fred Spencer, who had done photography in Africa during World War II, was ordered back to active duty. And he and Ed Steichen, who was really the father of naval photography in many ways, got together and organized this combat photo group. We had 10 people. We had a first class in charge of Camera Group 1, which was me. We had Dick Barlow, which was in Camera Group 2, which was the other one. Later on, they formed a sound camera group with Chief Smith. Was in charge of that group there. Both Dick Barlow and I were first class, and I had another first class with me, which was Kaz, and the rest of the crew were third class and second class and seamen. So anyhow, first thing we did, they decided they ought to make Marines out of us, so they sent us up to Camp Elliott, just north of San Diego, to learn how to handle a rifle. And that was quite an experience. Most of us couldn't hit the broadside of a barn. But anyhow, the Marines finally felt sorry for us and qualified us and said, okay, you can handle a rifle. Only trouble, we got to Korea, rifles were too heavy to carry. So we didn't carry rifles anymore. We slapped on a 45 or a 38 when we could get it. And we didn't shoot anybody with guns. Anyhow, we were shooting them all with cameras. So Korea was very interesting. We split up the two groups, Combat Photo Unit 1 and Photo Unit 2. We went Photo Unit 1 I'll talk mainly about because that's what I was in. First we went on board the Valley Forge and we photographed air ops. One of the things we did there was we took an old fuel tank which we hung on the bottom of an F6, but before we did that we cut holes in it, put a plate in it that you could photograph through, mounted a camera in it so we could go out and let them photograph strafing in really not gun camera film but in real high quality film. And so that was sort of interesting. After that, we went to the Helena, which was a light cruiser out there, no, heavy cruiser out there, and we worked with them for a while. And then after that, we went back ashore in Korea, and I was attached to about everybody who was ever there. First place we went was to Kimpo and Mag 33. We signed in with the Marines and we were there for a while photographing their activity, and they had F7Fs which were two-seaters, so we got to do some photography from the air. After that we went up to Wonsan and went up and photographed some of the prisoners there, and we were on the beach when the Navy and Marines finally landed at Wonsan. The reason we were on the beach was we were up waiting for them all to come ashore. The reason they didn't come ashore was they had more mines in the harbor than any place that anybody ever remembered. There was something like 1,000 mines, I believe, that they had to clean up to actually bring in the troops aboard landing craft. And so we were on the beach for a couple of days waiting for everybody to land so we could photograph them landing. And the Korean Marines were with us. They put up a big sign, "Welcome to the Americans," you know, about time you got here. So anyhow, after Wonsan, the UN came on board because as the North Koreans were moving back up, they were doing some very bad things. In Wonsan, they took one of the, it wasn't a nunnery, but it was where a lot of nuns lived. It was a school, a Catholic school, and they loaded all the priests in there, all the nuns, and all the students, and poured gasoline on them and lit them up. And that was when we were photographing for the UN. After that, we went over to Pyongyang and in the hospital found the same thing. I always thank God that it was cold because the smell of death after people's bodies are burned is not a very pleasant thing. And we had some interesting experiences there. But anyhow, we moved up with the troops as they were heading up towards the reservoir, and everything was going along real well. And lo and behold, I got orders back to the States to train new combat photographers to replace the crews that were there. So anyhow, I spun around, and our crew spun around, and we headed back down. And of course, they weren't that anxious to get us back home that fast. We flew out Class A, you know, they wanted us and our equipment. We had priorities for, I think it was over a ton of equipment between all the film, all the motion picture cameras, still cameras. It was really a large load. So anyhow, we had all this material, but they sent us back on a CVE called the Sitco Bay. And it was the slowest carrier I've ever been on in our life. We ran into a little storm down on the hangar deck. We looked up, and as we were on that storm, you could see the gap in the hangar deck open up like this. We were all praying that we were going to make it back to Hawaii.